Hi, this is Joe Tate, and you're listening to the Sports Fix.
The Fix is in. Call J-Rocc now at 216-539-7535. We want to hear from you now. 216-539-7535.
You love sports, and you know a lot. Your friends keep telling you, you should totally start a podcast. Well, it's time you listened and checked out Spreaker.com. People just like you have made their dreams a reality at Spreaker.com. For example, Jerry J-Rocc Myers started a Cleveland sports show called The Sports Fix, and now he has thousands of listeners. J-Rocc rocks, and so do you. Start your own podcast today at Spreaker.com. It's easy and free. That's SPREAKER.com.
Sports Fix listeners, do you tweet? So do we. So tweet with us 24/7 at the Sports Fix CLE.
Hey guys, J-Rocc here from the Sports Fix, and we always talking about using our platform to try to help the world and the society we live in, and everywhere I go and everywhere we go, bullying is one of the problems in today's society. There's nothing worse than any person, big or small, strong or weak, adult or child, feeling picked on, pushed around, vulnerable, and victimized at the hands of a bully. Change comes one person at a time, and my good friends at No Such Thing as a Bully are working on skills and techniques and ways that we can all change and make things better for everyone. Find out more at nosuchthingasabully.com.
Portions of the Sports Fix brought to you by Harry Buffalo. Catch every UFC pay-per-view live in full HD at Harry Buffalo North Olmsted, just outside Great Northern Mall. Harry Buffalo. Join the herd.
Live in Ohio, it's time to get your fix. The Sports Fix.
You got that right, buddy. It is time to get that fix on, baby. J-Rocc with you live in the house. We are back at it. The Sports Fix is on the air, off and running. Midweek edition of the Sports Fix. I'm happy to be able to get back in here with you guys as we are on the verge of the beginning. Well, it actually already began, but the meat of the NCAA tournament, one of my favorite times of the year, that first weekend when you just have an engorgement of basketball games coming your way. One of my favorite weekends is always it's right up there with Wild Card Weekend in the NFL, is that first week of NCAA March Madness. We're upon that here today, and hey, more than that, we are on the air, because I'll tell you what, it was a bit of a touch-and-go situation earlier this week, whether I was even going to get back in this week. I'm glad to be here. I'll talk to you guys more about that in a minute. Talk about irony too when I tell you guys this little bit here in a minute, but let's get rolling with things. Preview the slate. Dan Wismar is going to join us. As you heard, I've got the phone lines cracked for the first segment of the show today. 216-539-7535. We'll talk to you if you want to get in. Dan Wismar from Everybody Hates Cleveland is going to be in the house. We've got a lot to catch up on. We'll talk some NCAA tournament. We're going to talk Browns. Free agency began, and boy, I'll tell you, if you weren't convinced that they were going to truly wipe it down this time and just start from scratch, you figured that one out pretty quick the other day. We're going to get into all of the pluses and negatives, a lot more losses than additions. Although the Browns did just sign a new linebacker here this morning, a backup. Well, he's got a chance to get in the starting rotation here, perhaps replace Robertson. We'll talk about that in a moment, but Browns free agency to touch on. Cavaliers, good road trip. They didn't end it as strong as you'd have liked, and they keep showing me that, guys. They keep showing me both sides of Jekyll and Hyde. Man, you watch the first 3 games of that trip, and I'm trying not to, I was watching it the other night with some buddies, and I chalked it up. I said, hey, a lot of teams, fourth game in a road trip, you won the first 3, you're already home, and that's how you lose one of those. But do championship teams do that? Good teams do that. Do championship teams do that? That's what really gets me, because the last homestand, the weakest team they played on the homestand got them at home. This road trip, same thing here. Although you did have the Lakers in there as well, but again, came back and got them. They played hero ball with the 3. It was driving me nuts the other night because they just fell in love with that 3-pointer in Utah, and they sat sat there and allowed a team to beat them that had no business, because the Cavaliers had taken back control of that game, and then they just kept shooting. And again, we're going to get into all of this doing the intro now, but we're going to talk Cavs, Browns, Indians spring training. They made their first cuts the other day. A couple of guys got their beginnings of their spring going, so we're going to do all of that and so much more. Let's do it. You ready? I am ready, and I am daggone glad to be back in here. Welcome in to the Sports Fix. I am your host, the Big Daddy on the microphone, J-Rocc, Jerry Myers, with you here, doing the thing live across the Sports Fix radio network. Maybe you're listening live on TuneIn and their digital and mobile app worldwide on any device. Welcome in if you're listening on TuneIn as well. Welcome in all of you listening live on Spreaker.com, Mixler, their respective digital and mobile apps. Perhaps you are enjoying the show right on our home base, thesportsfix.net. Bookmark it if you haven't. It's a great backup site, place to listen to the show live, replays, all of that stuff right there. Plus, visit many of our great sponsors, including, hey, I say it all the time during the show, but today, maybe I'm in a reflective mood because of this past weekend, but Harry Buffalo, North Olmsted particularly, but all of them, but the one here in North Olmsted, visit our sponsors, and I don't spend much time plugging them. I do the thing, get right into the meat of what we do, but without those guys, particularly guys, without Harry Buffalo, there would be no Sports Fix. Those guys, Harry Buffalo has single-handedly pumped so much life into the Sports Fix behind the scenes and kept this train running. All of the businesses we work with have, but I mean, none has stuck to the front of the pack and really kept this sports thing, this whole movement that we've got going, more than Harry Buffalo, North Olmsted. Check those guys out. Bison Burgers are fantastic. I don't just plug it because I need to. I like going there and enjoying the festivities, whatever they are, with a good Bison Burger when I can. But those guys keep us going. So help keep those guys going as well as... I felt the need to mention that to my good friends over there at Harry Buffalo. But anyways, welcome in. However you're enjoying the show, maybe you're one of the thousands that listen, around the world, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on digital delay on sites like iHeartRadio, the world's largest internet radio provider, on iTunes, on Stitcher Radio, on CarPlay, on all of the podcast sites, all of the different places that you download, feed, subscribe, do the thing, and get the fix, and all that stuff that we talk about. Thank you guys, as always, so much for doing just that and being a part of the show. As I said, this is your show, baby. That we are a little bit different than everybody else. We try to have some fun up in this bad boy. We talk to you. You guys are the voice of the Sports Fix, whether it's on the phones, whether it's on the social media. We are constantly interacting with each other. 216-539-7535, number to call. Phone's only going to be open for the first a few minutes of today's show. We're going to get Dan Wismar in on the conversation a little bit earlier than usual, and we have got a lot to dive into with my man D Wizzy. So hit us up, 216-539-7535. Facebook, Twitter, email, always open. Facebook.com/thesportsfix, Twitter @thesportsfix, CLE, email us, thesportsfix@AOL.com. You can tweet me directly @JRockDaddy. You can Instagram me @JRockDaddy as well. Facebook.com/thesportsfix, Twitter @thesportsfix, CLE, email thesportsfix@AOL.com. Tweet with me directly @JRockDaddy. And as we get rolling, before I dive into anything with the show, so much to do, I want to go back for a minute, tell you guys the story. Plus, there's some people still wanting to make sure everything is all good, and indeed it is. I wrestle. Some of you newer to the Sports Fix may not be aware, but most of you are. I am also a professional wrestler on top of being a sports talk guy and a play-by-play and radio and all of that stuff. This past weekend, a little bit of a scary weekend, but hey, it's all good, man. I'm here and still chipping away, but I definitely and this is when I talked about ironic, this was it. I guess let me preface the story. Obviously, I got banged up. That's where I'm going to the bottom of that. But I had plans on Monday for the broadcast as we kicked off the week this week. I don't know if you guys heard in the news over the weekend, but for the first time ever officially, somebody from the NFL had linked the NFL to CTE and the brain damage that a lot of people have been investigating, Boston University, all of that. And we've talked about that a lot here on the show, the head injury, the concussions, all of that. And really, I had been doing some research. We were going to talk about that here with Dan on Monday. And I had just gotten a chance to finish the book League of Denial, which, as you guys know or may not know, is kind of what really blew the lid off of the stuff that had been hidden by the NFL over the years, because that's really what the crux of it was. Not obviously that these guys didn't know there was the chance for injury, but just how much deception was going on the side of the NFL. And I mean, I guess the closest I could relate it to would be when the cigarette companies were insisting that there was no connection between cigarettes and cancer. And it was kind of one of those. But anyways, I had been preparing for that, and I was dying to get on here because I read League of Denial. I saw the PBS special, which started the whole thing, which was written by the guys who also did Game of Shadows and blew the lid off of the Balco scandal and Barry Bonds and all of that stuff that was going on, Victor Conti and the steroids and the Marion Jones, that whole big thing. That these guys are the same guys that blew that up when they put out League of Denial, and they actually worked for ESPN at the time. League of Denial was written by Mark Finaru-Wada and Steve Finaru. These guys put a fantastic book together. So I was getting ready to talk. Matter of fact, I had been texting Dan Wismar leading up to Monday. I said, brother, if you haven't read League of Denial, you have got to sit down and read this thing cover for cover. We're going to talk about it on Monday. It starts with the story of Mike Webster. And if you don't know, also, one of the main characters in this is Dr. Bennett Amalu, who turned out to be the Will Smith character in the Concussion movie that just came out. So I was talking to Dan, and we were gonna talk about this, and I said, "Bro, man, we're gonna have some stuff to get into." Well, anyways, I wrestled over the weekend, and I had a couple of matches, some good stuff too. I think my total was 1 hour and 27 minutes of in-ring time over the weekend. Good thing I've been doing all that cardio. But getting back to it, I took a couple of really good knocks. First, I got knocked in the head a couple of times. I don't know this for a fact, but this is what I was told by a building full of people afterwards. Apparently, I got knocked pretty silly on Saturday because for about 2 hours after the show, I was half-dressed, still had my boots on and untied, and I apparently just kept walking around the building, having random conversations with people, and then sitting back down to tie my boots. And apparently this went on for a little bit. I was definitely pretty foggy, and I don't really remember a whole lot of that, but anyways, so it was pretty good. The doctors kept me for a good 3 hours after the show, and here's the thing, that wasn't even the most serious injury. I actually got knocked out of the ring, and I absolutely impaled my chest across the metal guardrails that keep the fans from coming into the ring, and I hit it chest first. I mean, I thought it felt like somebody took a metal softball bat and just whacked me across the chest horizontally right above my rib cage. I was very fortunate not to break my sternum or my ribs. But anyways, that's what I was concerned about. Apparently, I was concerned about the wrong thing, because as painful as that was, the head injury was much worse. I was knocked for a loop, and I ended up making the biggest mistake of trying to drive myself home at one point in the trip. Let me tell you something. I would imagine that it would be easier to drive drunk than it was to drive in the state that I was in the other night, because my head was just absolutely, and for days after, dealing with the headaches and the after effects. And we've talked bluntly about this before. I've had issues with this a few years ago that it did cause me to quit for quite some time, and then I got back into it. So anyways, long story short, it was a very scary weekend, and knock on wood, things are all right. As I went to the gym yesterday, and I know how to do this. I know the post-concussion process. You work your way back into it. I went in, I did some stuff. I got 90 minutes into my workout or so. Usually I'm in there for about 2.5 hours. Made it about 90 minutes, and the head started spinning, and I started getting a little bit nauseous. So I knew that was the end of that one. So we'll back it off. We'll start again today. We'll just get on the elliptical and we'll work our way through. And that's how it works. And so a lot of times, guys, we talk about it. People accuse these players of milking the system and stuff, but it really is a start and restart process as far as when you're coming back from a concussion. Sometimes you got to just restart and then build your way back up. And so anyways, but that's what I'm going through right now. I was coming on the air Monday, and at about 11:15, about 45 minutes before we went on the air, the lights, the sound, everything was killing me. I just couldn't do the show, you guys. I texted Dan. I said, "There's no way." I mean, it was still pretty good. It's cleared a lot in the last 48 hours. Knock on wood, it will keep going. I am tentatively supposed to wrestle this weekend. I can tell you that, obviously, if I'm not symptom-free by Friday, then I'll be canceling my appearance in Lorain this weekend. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that, but it'll be what it is because I have to be able to function in society. But how ironic that as we're coming in on Monday and I'm getting ready to do this show, and that was going to be the main thrust of Monday's broadcast, and then of course I get a head injury, suffer some brain injury along the way, and had to scrap the show. I said, boy, that is I think that if you look up irony in the dictionary, that would be where we'd be sitting. So a lot of you guys, I mean, I had dozens and dozens of messages, whether it was on my phone, on Facebook, across social media. You guys worried about me over the weekend. Definitely much appreciated. I am feeling worlds better still. Have to clear up some of this head stuff a little bit, and I'll tell you that it'll probably be a couple of weeks before I can breathe deep without wincing. But other than that, man, we're good to go. Hey, this is not ballet, and I do know the risks of what I do, which is the segue into where I wanted to go anyway. Because as I mentioned, to kind of start this story, let's get off of me now and my thing and get back to where I was. This was where we were going to go Monday, and I can't wait to get Dan in on the conversation and talk a little bit more about this, because this past week, for the first time officially, somebody from the NFL finally admitted the link between the sport of professional football and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, which is the brain damage, the pugilistic dementia, as some people call it, the boxer's brain, the battered brain syndrome that chokes out the vessels in the brain and eventually leads people into becoming something completely different than the person that they are. I mean, it's very, very much like an Alzheimer's type syndrome. So, as I said, starting to get ready for it, I saw the PBS special, but I sat down, as you know, no matter how well of a translation there is, it's always better when you read something, the original, whether it's, I tell people that, whether Moneyball is one that's in the air with the Browns and what they're doing lately. I go, man, if you like the movie, man, go read the book, because that's the real deal. But anyways, dove into League of Denial, and I'm not going to lie, I'm one of the biggest football fans you'll find. I'm a honk for the sport of professional football. I love it. We all do. I mean, and I grew up, like many of you, in the era, especially the 80s. When I was a kid, I think that was the heyday for the NFL highlight videos. I mean, they were selling Sports Illustrated subscriptions, and if you bought it, you got the free hardest hits, and they would come up with those names, those names for the movies, and it would just be like, Fields of Steel, and it would be a 30-minute documentary where John Facenda said, and then Harry Carson stood, a man amongst men. He was a human missile on the field. And I mean, you can't beat it, but we all came up in that era. So, I mean, obviously, this was a sport that, I mean, hell, it was built on the highlights of the brutality of what it was. And it is. It is a very brutal sport. We all know that walking in the door. And that's why I want to make that distinction, because I'm not one of these guys, oh, well, you got to protect football players from themselves. Like, people have the right to make the choice to do what they're going to do, and as long as they know the risks, that's it. But man, when you really start to see how deceptive the NFL was with its own players, as far as, I don't just mean hiding information from them, I mean as far as when point blank being questioned, being told you have nothing to worry about. There's absolutely nothing to worry about. And as the beginnings of the research came out to prove that there was some real brain damage going on to these players because of the repeated jostling of the brain. And it's not even the big hits, it's the repeated jostling of the brain over and over and over and over again that causes this, but watching how the NFL, and again, I relate it to Big Tobacco and what they did when it came to trying to stop people from finally having the truth thrown in their face, the ones that were denying it about smoking, and all, how the Big Tobacco went and literally bought and paid for researchers to put this corny stuff out there that says, well, there's no proof of this, and no. Football did the same thing, and that is the bad part of what football engaged in, because they really at that point were man, that's some stuff right there when you realize the level of financial they were putting ahead of the level of the people. But in general, I'm telling you, as hardcore of a football fan as I am, when you really dig into League of Denial and you really start to dive into more than just the headlines that we're hearing out here, it makes it hard to go back and watch football the same again. I'm not even joking. I texted Dan, and I'm going to get him in just a minute. We're going to take a break, and I'll start really jamming here. But I texted Dan. I said it makes it hard to watch football the same, knowing that, because I'll tell you what, and again, we're going to get to the break. I'll get into some of these specifics here in just a minute, but when you look at, and this is what Jeff Miller, by the way, from the NFL, to get back to where this story started, he is the senior vice president of the NFL for health and safety, and he admitted that the research has now shown that for the first time, the NFL can admit that, yes, there is definitely a link to football and CTE. And when you hear some of the numbers, because a lot of people say, hey, well, how do you know that they're not testing just the players that are damaged and not everybody else? Here's one small survey. I mean, the Boston University group took 176 athletes, 141 that were football players, and of the 94 that had played in the NFL, 90 brains out of the 94, this is just one small study, had CTE. Out of college football players, 45 out of 55 had it. And here's the number that makes you go, okay, there's something to it here. Of the people who quit playing high school or quit playing football at the high school level, only 6 of those 26 athletes had the same brain damage. And again, there's a lot more. We're going to get into it. But when you really see how this works, because people go, well, how is that? How can somebody, Chris Benoit, the professional wrestler for the WWE, who just disgustingly murdered his wife and child before killing himself a few years ago. It was a big story nationally. He was roided up to the gills, and he's a great example of the combination of steroids and CTE together, because when they broke his brain down, these same people, Boston University, investigated him. He also had the same football-related, pugilistic, boxing-related dementia details in his brain that all of these other guys have. And what that is that as the brain bruises, it heals itself as long as it's given time to heal. But when you don't give enough time, and that's why these guys have to take X amount of days off before they play, when you don't give enough time in between, a second concussion happens. And those second and third, the follow-up ones don't heal themselves. That's where the problems come in. And then you end up with splotches in the brain where basically the nerves die off, and these individual blocks end up with lesions that kill off the parts of the brain that make everything all tie together, and all of a sudden you get, and that's why so many of these stories talk about how guys became the exact opposite of what they were in real life. And again, so many people think of it as, the big hits, like Bruce in the chat room talking about Don Beebe when he got flipped on his head. I remember that hit. It was replayed by ESPN forever. They used that clip to sell a highlight video for my entire teenage years, I think, if I remember right. But anyways, it's not those big hits that are just, of course, those are the ones that are knockout blows, but a lot of this is from over and over and over again, the jostling and the jostling and the jostling of the brain around, and then not taking the time in between to allow the brain to heal. Because again, the body can heal itself, but the brain is different in that it can heal itself unless it's re-injured before it's healed, and that is when it loses its ability to heal itself, and you start getting into serious stuff. And that's along the lines here. Like this thing began. I'll tell you what'll grab you. You read the first 50 pages of League of Denial and read the Mike Webster story. Some of you may have heard, may not have heard. Mike Webster, the legendary Hall of Fame center from Ohio, played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The story of Mike Webster is downright frightening when you look at the after football down spiral of his life, and how, I mean, this guy was so whacked out in the head from pain, from all of it, from being just dementia, from being all just you name it. His brain was so whacked out that he was buying military grade stun guns and shooting himself with them to put himself to sleep for a nap for 30 minutes. That was the only way he could go to sleep, was to stun himself with a military grade cattle prod. And again, this is an extreme case. It's not like there's NFL players worldwide doing this, but there's thousands that are unreported. And I mean, as you read one after another, Dave Duerson, and then Junior Seau, and then this guy, and that guy, and this guy, and that guy. And I mean, it is amazing. You start to see how it comes together. And then what gets your skin crawling is when you see the lengths that the NFL went to. Now they have no choice but to embrace it. But when you see the lengths that they went to hide this from their own players, it's disgusting. I mean, it really is disgusting, and it really does make you change the way you look at the game, because all of a sudden you realize it's not just the big hits. It's the every play jostling of the brain that leads to this. And yes, as long as we give the players the information, it's like letting them know, hey, if you put a bullet in that gun and you pull the trigger, it may kill you. You let them know. Now, if they choose to take the gun and pull the trigger, that's their choice, right? But is it? Because if we get to the point, as more and more of this research comes out, I was telling some guys this the other day. I'm going to say something that I never thought I would say even maybe a year ago. If this research continues to show what it shows, that it is the repeated, it's the regular, every play stuff in football that leads to this. Can somebody tell me how the game of football lasts 10, 20 more years? This is just the beginning of the research. And this is just beginning to show this. I just don't know. Here's a line from the book that strikes me a lot, and I believe it was also used in the movie Concussion. But the NFL said this once, and Dr. Amalu was the one that this was pointed back to. If just 10% of the mothers in America decide that their kids are not allowed to play football because it's too dangerous, it's the end of the NFL as we know it. And as you see this and you realize that, again, I'm not just talking about what we know. I'm talking about what's continuing to come out with this. When you find out that you can't just put a special helmet on. You can't put a special mouth guard in. These things don't exist. There's tons of lawsuits, phony products out there. People say this stops concussions. That helps keep your kids safer. Riddell lost a big lawsuit because they falsely manufactured safe concussion helmets. So when you find that out, how can the game continue? Because at that point, people are going to start making the cockfighting arguments. There's a lot of things you can make, because just because somebody chooses to do something doesn't mean that society is going to allow it. I can't picture a society where something as large as the NFL just disappears. But I also can't picture a society, especially as PC as we have become in 2016, as more and more of this stuff hits the mainstream. I can't see how the game survives. And I love football. I don't like what I'm saying right now, but I can't see it, because I'm telling you, you guys they're just hitting the tip of the iceberg, and the stories that are making the front page of your newspaper aren't even the most important ones. Those are the headlines that grab your attention. But it's all the research that's being done. I'm telling you, they're piling up evidence against the game of football. It's going to be very tenuous, I think, 10, 20 years from now, whether the NFL is even near the same as it is today. I want to pick back up with this, and I want to get a whole lot more while we're talking football. We're going to get into free agency. We haven't even touched March Madness, Cavs, Tribe, so much to do. Let's take a break, get you some news. I'm going to get Dan Wismar in on the conversation, and we're going to rock and roll, baby. This is the Sports Fix. Thank you guys for joining us. Do not go anywhere because we're taking it up to the next level with Dan Wismar from Everybody Hates Cleveland when he joins me next after the news. Right back here on the Sports Fix, baby.
Get on it. How you gonna do it if you really don't want to dance? By standing on the wall. Get your back up off the wall. Tell me, baby.
The Sports Fix, the show that asks the question,
what you talking about, Lou? What you talking about, Lou? What you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, Lou? What you talking about? What you talking about, Lou? What you talking about? What you talking about, Lou?
We'll be right back.
Hey guys, before we go to the break, I want to talk to you a little bit again about our good friends at Harry Buffalo North Olmsted, the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championships, some of the hottest fights in the world today. Each and every one of their huge events, Harry Buffalo is one of the few places in Northeast Ohio you can go there and watch each and every UFC fight at the Harry Buffalo. And let me tell you, I've been there. The people are out the door. They are to the rafters. It is one of the craziest environments for some UFC fights. Wing Mondays, they've got great deals on wings and drinks, and every day of the week there's a different special, a different deal. And don't forget the Bison Burger, the unbelievable. It is the combination of a fantastic burger and eating healthy combined into one unbelievable sandwich. You have got to get a Bison Burger while you're there. So whatever you're looking for, whatever day of the week, Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sundays, there's something for you at the Harry Buffalo North Olmsted, just outside Great Northern Mall. Check them out today. Harry Buffalo, join the herd.
I'm Little Teapot, short and stout.
Here is my handle and here is my spout.
No, Dad, like this. When I get all steamed up, then I shout, tip me over and
pour me out. This is WWE superstar Roman Reigns. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
Visit fatherhood.gov, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Sports Fix listeners, like us on Facebook today. Facebook.com/The Sports Fix. Fantasy sports lovers, you put so much time, hard work, and effort into playing week to week that it quickly stops being a fantasy and starts getting real. Real time spent making real decisions, creating real victory.
I'm the greatest man in the world!
And when the smoke clears, you want to show off those victories with a real prize. I mean, a really real prize. Nobody does that like Fantasy Jocks. The crew over at Fantasy Jocks have beautiful, high-quality, and heavy-duty championship belts, rings, trophies, and so much more for all your fantasy sports needs.
The trophy's 12 feet high, and it is glorious!
Football, baseball, hoops, you name it, they have it. Plus, they have awesome draft kits and party supplies to make all your preseason activities the envy of everyone. If your league needs a ring, belt, or trophy, or you want to upgrade what you already have, there's literally only one place to go. If you're going to be a fantasy jock, do it right.
It's mine, the most magnificent belt ever created, and it's mine.
With America's fantasy sports superstore, fantasyjocks.com. No football? No problem at Harry Buffalo North Olmsted. From their awesome Wing Mondays to every single Cavaliers and Buckeye Hoops games in full HD.
Kyrie split the D, goes inside, teardrops it home right down Euclid.
That's way up in there for two.
The excitement never stops. Every day of the week brings a different set of food and amazing drink specials.
And now,
fans, Harry Buffalo North Olmsted is the home for every UFC pay-per-view live on the big screens.
Let's get it all!
And let's not forget their mouth-watering trademark, the Bison Burger.
They sure are good.
Nobody does bison like Harry Buffalo. The perfect combination of healthy and delicious.
Hey there, eat up, y'all. You's as good church-going folk. Y'all deserve a little treat.
What are you waiting for? Get to Harry Buffalo, just outside Great Northern Mall today. Harry Buffalo. Join the herd. Portions of the Sports Fix brought to you by Fantasy Jocks. Visit fantasyjocks.com, your fantasy sports superstore. Championship belts, rings, trophies, and more.
News break.
I'm Christine Lisi. Here's what you need to know. President Barack Obama, filling out a bracket with ESPN for an 8th straight year at the White House, picked Kansas to win the national title over North Carolina on April 4th. He's got the Jayhawks beating Texas A&M and Tar Heels knocking off Michigan State in his Final Four. The big dance kicked off with Florida Gulf Coast and Wichita State winning their first 4 games to lock down spots in the first round of the tourney. Eagles got it done against Fairleigh Dickinson 95-65 and will face off against North Carolina tomorrow. The Shockers top Vandy 70-50 and will meet Arizona tomorrow. The Dayton games wrap up tonight, Southern versus Holy Cross, and then Tulsa and Michigan. With their 2-1 overtime victory against the Hurricanes, the Capitals became the first NHL team to clinch playoff spot. Alex Ovechkin's league-leading 42nd goal on the season was the game winner for Washington. NFL, Patriots agreed to a 1-year deal with defensive end Chris Long. On the same day, they traded defensive end outside linebacker Chandler Jones to the Cardinals for guard Jonathan Cooper, as well as a second-round pick in this year's draft.
Sports Center is brought to you by JCPenney. Get an extra 30% off select items with your JCPenney credit card and coupon, or 25% with any other form of payment. It's a brand and a deal you won't find anywhere else.
This is head coach Gary Waters at Cleveland State, and you're listening to the Sports Fix.
Welcome back to the Sports Fix Live. J-Rocc back with you here as we roll on. Dan Wismar is going to join me in just a moment. See, I'll tell you what, talking about being knocked around in the melon a little bit this weekend. Besides the fact that I do have a splitting headache, like don't let the sour sports fan fool you, brother. There is some legitimacy when these guys tell you that it takes their time. Because, I mean, here I am. I told you I was feeling good. And after that first segment of yapping my trap a little bit, I got a splitting. Hopefully you don't, too, because that means you don't like listening to the Big Daddy. But definitely feel it. Speaking of, I also forgot, and this is a joke about getting knocked in the head, but I didn't even mention at the start of the show, talking about March Madness as we get rolling on here, the Sports Fix March Madness Tournament Challenge back in effect. Already seeing guys signing up for it. You've got another day or so here to get in on it. It's on ESPN.com. It's on their tournament challenge. All you do is search for the group named, guess what? The Sports Fix. That's it. Search for the group named The Sports Fix and join it today, because we have got a Cleveland Sportsbook prize pack going to the winner of the bracket challenge. Whoever's got the best one, whoever wins this thing, you will get a copy of Cleveland's Finest by Vince McKee, autographed by Super Joe Charbonneau. That's right, the former Cleveland Indians Rookie of the Year. You will get a Super Joe Charbonneau autographed copy of Cleveland's Finest and a copy of LeBron James' Redemption of the King, both by our man Vince McKee. And by the way, speaking of Vince, can't wait to get him on in the summer months coming up to promote his newest book that comes out this fall, Bernie, Bill, and the Browns, the story of the Belichick era of the Cleveland Browns and what set the stage for the Browns to head on over to Baltimore. Should be a great read. Another one by Vince. But two of his books, Cleveland's Finest and LeBron James' Redemption of the King, both coming your way. And don't forget, Cleveland's Finest will be autographed by Super Joe Charbonneau. Those are coming to the winner of the Cleveland Sports Prize Pack. And I'll throw a couple of other little doohickeys in there as well. Whoever's got the best bracket, just go to ESPN.com Tournament Challenge. Find group The Sports Fix and join us today. I'm going to the phone lines because I'm going to find my man Dan Wismar. We've got so much to get into. It's a beautiful midweek edition of the Sports Fix, and here he is himself, my man Dan Wismar. How you doing, buddy?
I am doing great, J-Rocc. Good to be back with you.
Hey, good to have you here. Glad to be back in it. Like I said, I'm just glad to be back at it, doing it again here today, and glad to have you with us. Speaking of the tournament, since I mentioned it real quick, who do you got winning this thing?
Oh, boy. I've got 24 hours to figure that out.
You're like, hey, man, I'm not doing that.
Tomorrow. There's a couple, I see Barack Obama went out on a limb and picked the number one team in the country.
No!
So
risky.
I don't know what to think about it, really. I've given it a little bit of thought, and I've seen some teams that I like. This time of year, you've got to figure that Michigan State's going to be in the hunt. And
I was going to say that's my pick. That's who I think. That's who I'm going with. I think Michigan State, just because Ohio State's not in it, and I don't really have any rooting preference otherwise. But Michigan State always makes that run, brother, and I got a feeling they're going to do it again this year.
They've got as good a shot as anybody, and really, I think it's as balanced as it's been in recent years. It seems like we say that every year, but last year with Kentucky and there were some dominant teams over the last few years, but there really is nobody dominant. You could legitimately see as many as 8 or 10 teams being able to walk away with it, which will make it interesting.
I'd like to see Xavier. I'd like to see.
Pretty impressed. Yeah, Xavier's impressed. I'm pretty impressed with Wichita State last night. I mean, they've got a tough game, but man, that was an impressive performance by them. They've been there. They've been to the Final Four before, and at least 2 or 3 of the guys on that team, that kind of experience, and that really showed down the stretch last night. But they're not. I don't think they're a championship contender. But I'm going to sort it all out here over the next 24 hours and make my picks, and I'll probably jump in your pool as well. Got a couple of other things I'm entering with a bracket. Sometimes you think that a trained monkey could do just as well, but it's a humbling experience once you get into the first couple of days and see all your brilliance, circling the drain.
Yeah, I don't claim any brilliance this year. I'm done. Last year was the last. I'm telling you, the more research I do, I wonder how many of you guys are in the same boat as me, because the more research I do, the worse I do every year. I swear, well, I did pretty good. Next year, I'm going to work even harder. And then I do worse. And then I work even harder. I do even worse. And I'm like, man, that first year when I only knew like 6 teams, I did pretty good. No, but you know what I'm saying? Like, you're going, hey, man, when I was flipping coins, I did better than this. It's just, that's what makes this thing awesome. Anybody that thinks that.
I've got people there. I got relatives and friends that say, hey, I got to fill out a bracket. Will you help me with this? Would you do my bracket for me?
Why?
Said, wait a minute. Don't you remember, a year ago when I did it and you finished, 47th? But anyway, I still have people that somehow think that I am wiser or more informed or whatever. And like you say, the more informed you get, the more you're the subject to, the theory that, the more you know, the less you know.
The more informed you are, the worse you are when it comes to the NCAA tournament, man. I'm telling you. So, anyways, we'll see. Like I said, I got sentimentally, I think Xavier, I'd like to see them make a run, obviously. I don't have the same sentimental pull for Cincinnati that I do for Xavier, but I think Michigan State, I think I'm gonna put them for now anyways up there with maybe Villanova too, but couple of teams that I think are right underneath the top seeds, because it's very rarely that the top seed makes the run through, as we've seen so many times when guys go out on a limb and they pick. I love those Final Fours where it's the 4 number 1 seeds, and you're like, boy, you didn't really have to work too hard at that one, now did you?
Yeah, and usually you're going to get 2 of those 4
at least
in the Final Four, but it's picking which 2 is always a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get rolling here. We're talking about the tournament. I wanted to back up a bit and go back to where I was at the beginning of the show, because this was where we were going to go on Monday before I decided to knock myself around a little bit the other day. But I had been relating to the audience that I was texting you during the week last week. I said, brother, this is one of the places we're going next week. And I was telling you about diving into League of Denial and starting to read that book and some of those tales, especially the beginning. I mean, they hook you in for sure, because the first couple chapters are all about Mike Webster and his descent into madness at the end of his NFL career, and even while he was still playing in the NFL. But man, I'll tell you what, I said it in the beginning. I said, boy, I'm not trying to be all hyperbolic or whatever, but I could seriously see this is just the tip of the iceberg. The other day, first time, and I got to think that the NFL is not happy with Jeff Miller right now, no matter what they say, because I think he made a legal mistake the other day. For the first time, somebody in the NFL connected the fact that we acknowledge that this is definitely happening to the guys that used to play in our league, and this is a real issue. This is the very first time that the NFL, it'd be like the first time the cigarette company said, yep, we admit it, you get cancer from smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like finally coming and acknowledging what has been obvious to everybody with a brain in their head. No pun intended. Like you say, with Webster, and I haven't read League of Denial yet, but what I have done is checked it out, and I've gone on Amazon, I've read some reviews, and I've read a couple excerpts. What really is, like you say, the kind of thing that gives you pause about ever looking at the NFL the same way is, we talked even last week about how the same thing happened to me with boxing. When you're giving support, fandom, whatever you want to call it, to an enterprise that essentially exists for the express purpose of causing brain damage to the opponent, you start to be conflicted about it, and finally you just at some point have to walk away from it. Now, football's different, I guess, in that it's not the express purpose of the game to cause brain damage, but it sure is the after effect or a byproduct of it. And what's disturbing to me, and I'm sure it was to you, is when you start hearing about, like you said earlier, the extent to which the NFL has gone to hide that fact and to sort of co-opt the doctors that they sort of get over to their side, who have one opinion of it coming in, and then the NFL kind of brings them into the fold, and all of a sudden they have a little bit of a different view or a little bit more nuanced view of it, I don't know the specific things that the book refers to about how the steps they've taken to hide the truth or to cover up the extent of the truth. But
well, I can tell you
now, maybe it's just a facing up to the facts and saying, deciding to no longer deny what is obvious to everybody.
One of the things that's, as you bring that up, one of the things that the NFL ended up getting caught doing was the fact that they basically hired some researchers to do some paid for research for them, much like when you get 4 out of 5 doctors that recommend this or that or the other thing. And what they did was they literally were going through the data, and they selected only topics or people, who fit their research. It's basically completely biased research. It's like, hey, oh no, we can't use that because it goes against what we're using. So they literally were like hand selecting some of the research samples that they were using. They were actually manipulating the data. But even, I think, okay, the stuff with the grown-up player, because clearly, even if you didn't know, and nobody, I think, knew, because nobody knew that this kind of brain stuff, it didn't get discovered until 20 years ago. And I don't just mean in football. I mean in general. Like, even with Muhammad Ali, they called it Parkinson's for so long. It wasn't until recent decades that they figured out the actual brain damage that was being done from the blows. They've now isolated it very much into what it is here. But not only you hear how the league was covering it up from their own players, and as players were coming to them and saying, hey, is this true? We're starting to hear this. No, we've got the research. It's not true. So now you're lying to the people that are asking you if there's a risk. That's bad stuff. But man, I want to talk about the youth football. This was one of the things I mentioned. Riddell got sued, and they ended up having to admit that they lied. The NFL, in their attempt to cover this up in the early 2000s, they led to what could have been really damaging to the kids of our nation, because their slanted research was teamed up with by helmet companies and by other guys looking to make a quick buck. And in the early 2000s, there was just a splattering all over the place of concussion-proof helmets or special mouth guards that eliminate concussions, or actual vitamins that you could take that were told that they help your brain recover from concussions. And these things were put out here for youths specifically. The Riddell sold millions of dollars of youth concussion helmets that it turned out were absolutely 0% safer than the regular helmets that were out there. But they made millions because parents lined up saying, hey, I got to keep my kids safe. I got to keep my kids safer. So not only did people make a lot of money off of that, but look at youth football. Because here's the thing. You want to stop an adult from playing football, you can't. If they're going to want to go do it and they're aware of what could happen. Like now, I don't know if people realize this, but any football player from this day forward cannot sue the NFL for brain damage, because now that all this stuff is out there, you can't accuse the league of hiding it, because you now know if you play football, then this is the risk of what could happen. But by them finding out that it's not the big blows, it's the repeated jostling of the brain, literally, that's going to eliminate youth football, I think, in the next 5 years, Dan. I think that you are going to see no more youth groups, and I think you're going to see, we've talked about the insurance with the high schools. I think that this is going to strangle out, no pun intended, the youth football of America very, very quickly, because you're realizing that this brain damage is literally starting once they're bumping those brains around at that young age.
Yeah, that's true. And we had kicked around the idea that, floated by me by some people in the insurance business, that at some point there might be just a refusal based on risk and liability for millions of dollars, that insurance companies would just cease to insure the game at the high school level. And if you do that, and the theory that if football is going to die, it's going to die from the bottom up. And I think that's what
true.
You're suggesting here, that the parents will just simply say, my kid's not going to play football. I don't want them to do that. And if you kill it at the high school level, you end up killing it at the college level, and that's the feeder system for the NFL. And that if it happens, that may be the way that it happens. I think football could die a lot sooner if that thing that happens that we all dread happening, and that is that there would be some traumatic thing, a death, a fatality on the field, which I think is just bound to happen as the athletes get bigger, stronger, faster, and collisions become more violent, and that would be something that would shock everyone to the point where people might just walk away from it, or it would be so unseemly to even take part in watching it that people wouldn't do it anymore.
I'll tell you what, but that's almost happened more than you think, Dan.
The slower death of it may be happening as we speak, and you already see it as parents are steering their kids away from football into other sports. Well, one of the things that people don't realize, and it's something I've read a little bit about, is the idea that football may not even be the worst of it. I mean, we're a soccer-playing nation now, and
yes.
Kids that play soccer have just as much, if not more, trauma associated with butting heads with other people, and, of course, constantly hitting the ball or whatever with the head, and without equipment, of course. And they are equally, if not more, at risk, and not least because there's more of them involved in it. It's such a huge sport that kids start playing at 4, 5, and 6 years old. So steering kids into other sports besides football doesn't necessarily solve the problem, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Oh no, you're absolutely right about that. And as you talk about the what may happen eventually on the field, that's some of the things some of the side stories that you read as you go through books like League of Denial. How close that's come that people don't even realize. Some scary instances that's happened on the football field, and how close guys came to that happening, because that would of course be the big thing. And I go back to the line as we're talking about dying from the bottom up. I mean, of course it's the money line, but this came, and we talked about ways that the NFL was hiding it. One of the things was so many of their commissions that they initially put together to study this were the team doctors, whose job it was to put the players back on the field as quickly as possible. So when these scientists would actually cut up a brain and show it to them and say, hey, look at the damage in this brain, the doctors would say, oh, and they'd shoot it all down. But one of the NFL's own doctors, and I can't remember, I want to say he was tied in with the Steelers? Because I know Bennett Amalu was the Steelers doctor. That's where, and Joe Maroon, who's the guy up in Pittsburgh. Those were two of the guys that were at the top of this, and they started with the Steelers organization. Matter of fact, the impact testing that they use now was created because Chuck Noll, it was about Merrill Hodge. Merrill Hodge was damaged badly from concussions, and Chuck Noll wanted him to play. And Dr. Maroon said, no, he can't. And Chuck Noll said, how? Why? How do we know? Because it was an invisible injury, and there was no way to do. And so he was like, you know what? Coach Noll is right. There is no way to show the coach why this guy can't play. So that's where they came up with the idea of getting the baseline test. But I go back to the line of the doctor from the Steelers telling Dr. Amalu, do you know what you've done when he cracked open Mike Webster's brain and proved the brain damage that he had? If just 10% of mothers in this country think football is dangerous, that is the end of football as we know it. And I go back to that line right there, just 10%. And I think that that's quickly where we're getting to.
Yeah, and another point to make, too, is that it's not just stories like Mike Webster, who was, as you put it, driven to madness by this thing. But other people, and the stories I think are much more numerous, frequent when you hear about just chronic pain. I mean, I think that's what got Dave Duerson, who at some point put a shotgun in his chest and in order to save his brain, ended his life because of just debilitating and chronic pain. I don't know a lot about Junior Seau's circumstances, but I think that was a great deal of the case there too. And I know the book deals a lot with the Junior Seau situation near the end, from what I'm told.
Duerson as well. They talk a lot about him. He's one of the main in that book. Seau, Duerson, Mike Webster, one or two other guys are kind of the bigger ones that they point around. And with Duerson, it was the pain and it was the depression. He's another one that they point out. He was thought to be perhaps a coach when he left the NFL. I mean, this was a guy that he went into the restaurant business and had I want to say at one point he had his meat company up to $30 million in revenues a year. And then as the dementia started to get into his brain, he started to be his own worst enemy. And next thing you know, he started making irrational business decisions. This guy went from having a $30 million food service company to being dead broke, destitute, lost everything that he had worked for, isolated his family, ended up divorced, all kinds of things. And what gets me with him and so many others is the stark contrast. You know, a guy like Mike Webster, and even there, his family, and everybody's family glorifies them and say, oh, well, this guy was a great guy and he changed. But with many of these guys, they don't just change. They weren't just mean football players who got meaner. A lot of these guys went from gregarious, outgoing, just life of the party, guys, that kind of guy that lights up a room, to guys so depressed that they put a shotgun to their chest.
Yeah, it really is sad. And, football may go the way of boxing. It certainly seems to be on that trajectory, and it's all about awareness. And tell me this, Jerry, regarding the class action suit that some 5,000 players, I understand, are in a class action, and I understand that there was a temporary or at least a proposed settlement offer that they were inclined to accept on the part of this class action. Do you know what the status of that lawsuit is? And I know obviously there are people now that do not want this thing to be accepted because it will sort of end this thing to some degree and maybe prevent some future actions. They don't think they're getting enough, presumably. And what can you tell us about that case?
Well, the first settlement got thrown back. The judge said this is not good enough because there was a lot of things that weren't addressed. So and I think we talked about this. It was a few months ago when they redid it, and the second settlement was approved. So, but it's under appeal right now because the opposite side put the appeal on it. But tentatively, the new settlement was approved. Here's the problem. What you mentioned is the cutoff date that they added. They have now put. Moving forward, anybody diagnosed with football-related CTE after April 22nd, 2015 cannot sue the NFL. Now, here's my thing. I think they're right about that, and I think that this is going to get cleaned up, and they'll have to reword it again. Because, Dan, think about it from this perspective. Okay, I get it that if you start playing or if you continue playing after April 22nd, 2015, you're acknowledging that you're aware of this. But I think that there's guys who have been playing for 2 decades, have been playing for 10, 15 years that are already damaged from prior to this. I think that there's got to be a window. Maybe it's anybody whose career ended before I don't know where you find it, but I think that's the sticking point, is where do you put the cutoff? Because just because a guy found out about it now, if I'm 20 years into my NFL career, if I'm Charles Woodson, well, when I started playing in the NFL, you guys were still lying about all of this. You guys were still denying all this. So why should a guy, and I'm just throwing a name because he's a 20-year vet, but why should a guy like Charles Woodson not be able to also get the benefits from this if he didn't, just because he didn't retire until after the point where you guys decided to acknowledge this? I think that's the biggest thing, is how do you determine when to cut a guy off? But as it stands now,
yeah, that's true. You think there'd have to be a grandfather clause kind of agreement in there, and it's not just because he hasn't retired yet; it's because he hasn't died yet. Right. Because, you can't even determine whether you've got it until
yes, you can though. That's the new thing, Dan.
At your brain after you're dead. So it's at this point at least, you don't have the ability to find out if you've got CTE while you're living.
That's not true. I'm glad you brought that up, because I had that buried in my notes here. They have come across a test, and I believe that it's begun to be used kind of in a larger scope now. But for the first time, they now have the ability to detect CTE in living people. And so,
well, that's good news, and I stand corrected. I'm glad to hear that.
I mean, it's a test that's continuing to develop, but actually, that's near the end of the book. That's one of the things that they bring up, is that they developed a test that can allow you to, I don't know if it's through a combination of brain scans or whatnot, but they now know what certain things to, and it's still being developed. Obviously, it's not like a magic. We can't just test but I think within 5 years, they will be to the point where, and that's the new question, is now that they've developed this test, the new question that everybody's batting around is, do you test players after every season, after every game? How often do you test players now to make sure that they're good for because that's going to be the next thing, is if you're able to test guys for it, then where do you put those tests? And I would think that if we're walking down this path, it would be a week-to-week thing. I would think you would be brain scanning these guys after every week, because that would be the only way to catch anything preemptively.
Well, that's true, and I guess you'd also have to have some kind of a baseline for whether a guy like me, who's never played competitive football beyond 9th grade, but might have banged his head at various times in his life, is having similar test results absent football, because you can't necessarily, that correlation isn't causation. And a lot of us might be walking around with some degree of CTE, even though we've never played the game.
That's very, very much true. And again, so many people come at me with, but these guys are grown-ups and they know what they're doing. As somebody who not only has dealt with it, but just understands this in general, as an athlete, it's one thing. You tear ligaments, bones, anything, even all of my wrestling injuries. I'm fully aware of the fact that 20 years from now, let alone 20 years from now, every time it rains, things are going to ache, and I may have a hard time getting dressed in the morning. Like, I am aware. And when you have physical injuries, they heal and they go away eventually. You know that you learn how to tolerate the pain, and then once you can deal with it, then the torn ligament in your shoulder starts to not bother you as much, and you get back to work. And so, but the brain is different, because unfortunately it's the one part of the body that when it's damaged and then damaged again, it cannot heal itself. I think that's the scariest part of it, and that's what people don't, and myself too. Hey, do you know how many times I have to remind myself every day, hey, man, you're not just going to wrestle this weekend. If you're not feeling good, you're canceling your, and I don't cancel shows, but the point is that I cannot allow myself to go, hey, I don't feel any pain, I'm just going to go wrestle because who cares? Because that's how, it's not like any of these guys woke up. Mike Webster did not wake up and say, I want to torment my family and kill myself today. You know what I mean? These guys end up that way and don't know how they got there.
Yeah, you're right. Like you say, the damage is cumulative and doesn't heal itself like your liver can heal yourself if you stop drinking.
Yes.
And anyway, and you know, when you're old as me, for example, you know, every day you wake up because things hurt. That's what actually gets you out of your sleep. You know, body parts hurting. But again, that comes with the territory of being my age. But anyway, well, it's a tough problem, and I'm intrigued enough now that I've got to get this book. I'm going to get it on my Kindle here and get through it here sometime over the next few days. But
and watch the documentary too.
Actually, yeah, the Frontline show. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, the one from PBS. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure, too. And I'll tell you what, let's segue from that. You're listening to the Sports Fix. J-Rocc, Dan Wismar, tossing around a lot of stuff, talking some concussions in football. And let's get to football. Let's get off of that for a minute. Let's talk a little bit about the sport of football. As we're speaking, I get the alert across my phone. We were going to talk Browns free agency in a moment because the Browns have truly raised the slate clean. This is the true rebuild that they talked about. We've thought that they put us through. No. This is the rebuild that they're going to put you through. They wiped out free agency. Carlos Dansby, according to the alert I just got, the Browns have informed him that he will be released and he will not be brought back with the team. So both Dan and I, one of our favorite members of the Browns, Dansby will move on. Perhaps he's been replaced by Demario Davis, who the Browns announced this morning that they signed. He's a third-round pick who played for the New York Jets for the last few years. I hear he's a decent linebacker. He'll probably be either a starter or the first sub off the bench for the Browns here, at least the way things look now. But they signed Davis here, but they lose Dansby. They lost all four of their key free agents that we talked about last week. They saw Travis Benjamin go to San Diego. They watched Alex Mack go to the Atlanta Falcons. They lost Tayshaun Gibson to the Jacksonville Jaguars because he wanted to win. And listen, I don't have any problem with free agency, and I don't have a problem with Tayshaun Gibson going to Jacksonville. But look, man, just say you got paid. You cannot go to, and this isn't even a Browns thing, you can't go to Jacksonville from Cleveland and say you did it to win, because they are the two losingest teams in the NFL for the last 10 years. And I think the Jaguars have won one more game than the Browns in the last decade. So don't say that you went there to win. Just say that you went there because they gave you $40 million to go play football. But they lost Gibson. And then the Browns, and this is the one I think that the Browns fans maybe didn't get upset about. You should have got upset about Mitchell Schwartz, not because they let him go, but because they let him go. Basically, once the free agency decisions went the way they did, they said, hell, we're not wasting $10 million a year or whatever on Mitchell Schwartz. We're going to pull that offer and let you just go ahead and go wherever you want. The Browns, and I'm hearing that the Browns were a bit disingenuous about that behind the scenes. They basically just said, you know what? Everybody left. We are going to scrap this thing clean. Never mind Mitchell Schwartz. And they pulled his offer from the table. So Mitchell Schwartz walked off as well. So now the Browns have to rebuild their offensive line. And, Hey, this is the rebuild. We knew it was coming, but this is the rebuild here. It has been raised clean. Johnny Manziel no longer with the Browns. And the Browns thought they were slick, by the way. They saved Johnny Manziel so that they could lose all their free agents on Thursday, then cut Manziel on Friday and have everybody go, well, at least Johnny's gone. And it was able to blunt the blow a little bit from losing half your roster on Thursday there. But anyways, that's the way this thing has started, and we haven't even talked about Colin Kaepernick yet.
Well, Jared, I have a few thoughts about the free agency situation, and first of all, I don't understand fans who say, these the Browns let them go. the Browns, the Browns didn't let them go. The Browns don't have any say in the matter if the agent doesn't return your phone call. The idea that this was the Browns' decision, and you're giving the Browns credit for having too much agency in the whole thing. These guys were free and clear to go. I heard Adam Schefter say that NFL players treat the Browns like a college experience.
Like college, yes.
4 years and out. I thought that was the thing that was disturbing to me, or distressing, discouraging, I guess, to me, was when you hear the national pundits who don't have a dog in the fight, who don't have care one way or another about the Cleveland Browns, when they say that what they hear from agents and from players is that the Browns front office was, and the word that came up most often was, clueless. That they didn't know how to do this. They didn't know how to take part in this free agent process and this negotiating game. And how can we be surprised at that when we have guys that have never done it before? We have Sashi Brown, who's a general counsel, and he might understand the salary cap, in terms of the words on the page. But what he's never done is deal with an agent in a free agent situation and sell a program or sell an idea or sell a goal or a scheme or something to a free agent player. When I heard that, when I heard the clueless word come out about the way that the Browns were conducting themselves in the free agency process, that's just disheartening.
Yep.
And while not surprising, because we knew going in that when you put people in positions of being football operations head that have never done it before, you're going to have a learning curve. I think some of the local media, Jerry, has been really pretty charitable toward the organization by saying, well, it's a learning curve, and this is their first time out of the gate, and they're making first year mistakes. And, no, clueless is what they said. Not feeling their way around, or I just think they've been kind of too nice about it in terms of reaping what we've sown, which is putting non-football people in positions where they have to.
And you know what's funny about that, Dan, wasn't that why Jimmy Haslam fired Chud the way he did so quickly? Because, hey, we realized right away this guy was in over his head, and we didn't have time to wait for this. And Mike Pettin, they were complaining right off the bat that he was making too many first-year mistakes, and we're learning on the job. Now we're going to hire a whole front office who's never done this before and watch that. Not like the Browns had the best chances here, and they weren't doing anything in free agency, but I've heard the same things you've heard, even with their offers to these guys. They were clumsily delivered, awkward in their presentation, and I don't know if they thought this was going to be... See, and you know what? And I'm not trying to do the baseball football thing with Paul DePodesta, but I do believe there's a difference in free agent negotiations in the sport of football and the sport of baseball because of the same differences in the game on the field. One is fast and one is slow. In baseball, deals can take days, weeks, even months to get done because there's time. But people are, I don't know if it's just a more patient sport, but baseball does things with a bit more patience. And perhaps, maybe he thought, hey, we're going to do the back and forth dance like we do in baseball. This is the NFL. Guys are trying to get signed on day one. Make your best offer, and that's it. And then I'm going to take his best offer, and your best offer, and we're going to see what happens. That's it. You don't have 3 weeks to come back to the table and go, hey, so did you pitch yourself around the league? These guys are signing immediately.
Oh, yeah, and they get a guy into town, and they don't want to let him get back on a plane.
Right.
Before he leaves town, unless he's signed a contract. So, yeah, and I'm also glad to see this year, Jerry, how it looks like the league is coming after some franchises, and I think the Bengals were named as some people who were colluding or were...
Tampering, yeah.
This has always been sort of a open secret in the NFL that, hey, agents aren't waiting until the day that you're technically allowed to sign a free agent before they're starting to talk with general managers about who's available and, hey, I might want to sign with the Atlanta Falcons come next Thursday. Let's talk about some numbers. But maybe the league is starting to crack down on them a little bit. I want to say it was the Bengals or the Falcons. One or the other of those teams is getting landed on a little bit by the NFL for for that kind of chicanery going on before the free agent process actually begins. But still, and I don't know what happened with Mr. Schwartz, Jerry, but maybe it just got to the point where, well, first of all, we know that Alex Mack signed for less than the Browns offered him.
Yes.
So the idea there that the Browns, quote unquote, let him go, well, no, they didn't. They made a good faith offer, and he chose to go elsewhere. Same with.
You think it's any coincidence, by the way, that he followed?
Was it hard to leave Cleveland, Travis Benjamin? Not at all.
I was gonna say, he did. He said not at all. Did you see though, Mac? You think it's any coincidence that he followed the best offensive coordinator that his game has ever played under, as far as he gained the most, I think, under Kyle Shanahan. So
yeah, well, we'll see how long the Kyle Shanahan era lasts in Atlanta.
That's true. He may be. Yeah.
Doubts about that, but still, yeah, he made his decision, and that's fine. But this.
But I think there's something to it.
Maybe, and the Browns are going to end up with some compensatory draft choices, probably third round. That's the highest you can get.
I thought they've got three. They got three compensatory picks, didn't they?
I'm sorry.
They got 3 for this year's draft, didn't they?
Well, that's for
from last year
free agent class.
Yeah, and next year
the highest player that they lost last year netted them a 4th rounder. This year, I think Alex Mack will certainly land them a 3rd.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think they get a 3rd,
land them a 3rd or a 4th as well. So they're going to be looking at least 2 extra picks in the first 3 rounds of the draft. So that's something. And then again, buying extra draft choices for the Cleveland Browns has never seemed to work out real great when you've got guys like Ray Farmer making the picks for you. You've never really been able to trust the fact that extra draft choices are going to be a feature instead of a bug. But anyway, we'll see how that works out, and maybe that's like you say that. I think it gives the front office a little too much credit to call it a strategy. That, hey, we're going to just clean house with the free agents.
No.
They left. I'm not saying you're calling it that. I'm just saying people in general saying, the Browns are cleaning house. The Browns are going to bottom out. Well, yeah, they are, but let's not give them credit for taking action to do that, because that was something that was done to them. They were bottomed out by the fact that their 4 free agents left.
Yeah, the only part of that I see as the team's decision is Mitchell Schwartz. And to be honest, again, I think it was a simple fact of, wow, we wanted to keep all 4 of them. Those 3 left in 5 seconds. Well, there's no point in wasting the money on Mitchell Schwartz when we can easily draft a guy for the rookie minimum and put him in the spot, because we're going 2-14 no matter who we put on this offensive line next year. So, I mean, I honestly believe that's why they pulled the Mitchell Schwartz offer. I think if they had their way...
Or maybe they got to the point where the bidding was such that they chose not to go...
I heard it wasn't, though. That's the thing, is that
already was. So.
See, that's the thing, though, Dan, is I don't know what you've heard, but I heard that is not the case, that Mitchell Schwartz's best offer was from the Browns, and he was coming back to accept it when the Browns told him, hey, never mind, go find it somewhere else because we're pulling the offer from the table. And to be honest, if that's true, that's going to hurt the Browns, and not that they aren't already hurt with the way they play, but that will hurt them in future negotiate. I mean, even when they're good, things like that hurt you in negotiations when agents tell stories of, hey, these guys made an offer and said it will be here when you come back to the table next week, and then when you come back to the table, that offer's not there. That is not negotiating in good faith, and I do think that will hurt the Browns later.
Yeah, that may well be true. And certainly it's, I'm sure you probably heard the story about DePodesta being
getting laughed at,
unrecognizable, and overhearing people bad-mouthing the Browns.
What do you expect?
He tried to put the best spin on it by saying that's part of the fun, of doing what they're doing, as if he and Sashi Brown are cooking up a plan that they're so pleased with themselves that that people are making fun of them because only they know the secret of the secret sauce that they're brewing up in Korea. So we'll have to see how that plays out on draft day. But Yeah, like I said, giving them credit for a strategy is maybe giving a little bit too much credit.
Hopefully he can identify the next Kevin Youkilis for us and we can get something going. But, hey, you know what? While we're talking about this, though, you want strategy, not strategy, Browns free agency. Okay, I'm with you up until this point. We've lost everybody. We're going from here. What business in the world does a franchise that has now, whether you did it by force, choice, whatever, you're sitting where you're at now, why in the world do you trade for when I say franchise quarterback, I don't mean a franchise quarterback. I mean a franchise quarterback in everything but the actual franchise quarterback part. He's got a big money contract, big pedigree, no performance on the field lately. Why in the world would you go trade for somebody else's busted quarterback in Colin Kaepernick?
Well, I guess maybe to get you through 2016 on an $11 million salary, which is not franchise quarterback salary. His big dollars kick in subsequent years on his contract. I don't know that we're even, presumably they're holding out for a second. We are offering a third. Hugh Jackson likes the guy.
And I wouldn't give a fourth.
I'm not a big Kaepernick fan. I don't necessarily want him here, but Hugh Jackson seems to like him, and the idea seems to be that you bring him in here for 1 year on that contract, then you cut him if you want to. Or
who's going to protect him? Who's going to protect him? Who's going to protect him? You might as well put Josh McCown, the robot, back behind that offensive line, because who is going to protect this offensive line is shot next year, man. They couldn't protect the quarterback with Alex Mack and Mitchell Schwartz. And by the way, I'm just going to throw this out here, guys. I think we've seen the last of Joe Thomas in the Cleveland Browns uniform, and I will say this has nothing to do with good, bad, or ugly. It has to do with the fact that the Browns now, no matter what they might have sold themselves on their plan, the Browns have to know that it's a guarantee 3 or 4 years before they're in a position to try to compete for a playoff spot. And I think if you've got any emotional pull towards what Joe Thomas has given your organization, you offer to trade him to a Super Bowl contender, because he won't still be playing football when the Browns circle back around. That's just the truth. Joe Thomas' career will not last as long as this rebuild. He's not going to be around in 3 or 4 years. So why not give the guy the standing ovation that he deserves and let him go to Denver or let him go to New England or somewhere where he can have at least a shot at playing in a freaking playoff game before his career is over?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And, if there's a team out there that's ready to give you, even a second-round pick for Joe Thomas, I don't know if you could get that right now. But, yeah, and it's not just to do right by Joe Thomas. It's to help your football team get better. So, yeah, I'm okay with that. And, by the way, I was just spitting out the case for Colin Kaepernick, not to say that I agree with bringing Colin Kaepernick in. I think Colin Kaepernick is Luke McCown or Josh McCown. Maybe he's Luke McCown.
No way, Josh McCown. I'd rather have Josh McCown than Colin Kaepernick, my friend.
Well, I know, and there are people that agree with you just based on what I've read. NFL people that say, I'd just as soon have McCown play as Kaepernick. Maybe Hugh Jackson feels differently. They've obviously talked with them. But again, Kaepernick says, I'll redo my contract for Denver, but not for Cleveland.
Yeah.
That's supposedly his position. So right now we know I want to go to Denver. I don't want to go to Cleveland. You might as well just say that flat out.
You got to think that's where he's going.
I don't want to bring a guy in that doesn't want to be here.
I got to be honest. Denver has to have their eyes on another quarterback. I cannot possibly think that they're going to go into next season with Mark Sanchez as their quarterback in Denver, losing Osweiler and Peyton Manning. There's no way.
He's a backup. He's a backup. And yeah, they're gonna do something, or they're gonna draft someone. By the way, does any of this change your idea about what the Browns do at number 2?
Man, that's where I was going to go next. I was going to ask you almost the exact same question. I just don't want any of those quarterbacks at number 2. Matter of fact, I'll go back to who I want. I think I'm back to Joey Bosa again, which I was going to start with talking some draft talk about Ohio State here, their pro day the other day, and Joey Bosa, one of the guys who, not that there was that much concern, but there was the talk about the slow 40 time or whatever. Joey Bosa boosted himself right back up. Michael Thomas, I heard, was the star of the pro day the other day, boosting his stock way up when it came to Ohio State's pro day the other day.
Yeah, no doubt. He ran, 4.32, 4.39 or something, and obviously that's a faster track than a combine track. But Michael Thomas, obviously is a fabulous athlete. His hands measured at 10 inches and a half, 10 and a half inches hands, which is bigger than any quarterback in this entire draft. Great hands, So yeah, he helps himself a lot. I've seen some people kind of dropping him out, and McShay is one of them, who has him as a high second rounder. I don't think Michael Thomas lasts past number 20 in the first round.
That's what I'm thinking.
Even you could say that maybe Treadwell and some guys might be ahead of him in the wide receiver rankings. But Treadwell had his knee shredded about a year and a half ago, so I don't, that would be my biggest question about him. Is he 100%, and how long does that knee hold up in the NFL? Michael Thomas never been hurt, and I think if I'm an NFL team, I'm looking hard at him, and that's not just my Buckeye homerism talking.
No, I heard the Chargers were one of the teams that were spending a lot of time with him at the campus after the
if he would last till 32, I think he's a no-brainer for the Browns, unless they
absolutely
back themselves into taking a QB at that spot. I still I don't think they're going anywhere until they get a quarterback, and I don't think they get a great quarterback at 32. A lot of I'm in the Carson Wentz camp right now, and I'd be perfectly fine taking him at 2. That would not even if they can't with a straight face say that their analytics tells them that Carson Wentz is the second best player available in the NFL draft. If they choose to take him and say, okay, this is our guy going forward, and we think he can be our quarterback for 10 years, I'm okay with it.
Let me ask you though, and I've got to think. I mean, and obviously you don't know who's going to come out, who's not going to come out, all of that stuff. But does the fact that this is different than the last few false rebuilds that the Browns kind of. I'm trying to think of the right wordage. They were rebuilding, but they were going to kind of try to rebuild around the pieces of what we had. Seeing as how this is really going to be start from scratch, for a fact we're willing to lose, 13, 14, 15 games for the next couple of years. How does that change looking at the quarterback? Because to me, it's just J-Rocc talking to you here. To me, you're going to be drafting in the same positions next year. You're going to have 7 to 10 draft picks, and they're all going to be at the top of the round again next year. There's just no chance to fool yourself otherwise. So does that change your thought on taking a quarterback? Because to me, at that point, I'm taking whoever is the best guy there all day this year, because I'm going to do this again next year. And I know that I've got a shot at a different group of quarterbacks. I'm just not sold on these guys with my number 2 pick.
Well, then obviously the question is, are you sold on these guys? And, can you legitimately say, and there are, obviously differences of opinion among the people that get paid to weigh in on such things.
Yeah, I'm not one of them.
that Carson Wentz or Jared Goff are legit top half of the first round or top 10
I like them.
Players in this draft. And if you're top 10, I'm okay with taking them. The more I read about Carson Wentz, the more, smart NFL people say that he's the real deal, that they think that he has a great future in this league. So, to me, it's going to be about how willing is this organization to go through 2016 with Josh McCown. In other words, and just in terms of the fan base and the community and everybody saying, really, this is what you're going to do? This is what you're going to draft an offensive tackle at number 2 or an outside linebacker at number 2? and subject us to another season of 16 games or maybe 4 games of Josh McCown and 12 of some rum-dum backup who we haven't ever heard of, Austin Davis or someone. Are we really going to do that, or are we going to start this thing fresh? And even if you draft Carson Wentz and sit him on your bench, at least you're saying Carson Wentz is our guy.
Yeah.
And we're gonna develop him. I hear exactly what you're saying about we're going to be picking at the top of the draft again next year.
You know it.
And we can scope it out.
You know who I want? You know who I want?
You've got to get through a season here.
I'm not gonna lie.
With some semblance of this is the future. So hang in with us, people.
You know what the future is,
people
Dan?
That are sending them a check this Friday for $1,900.
No, I've made up my mind. I've decided on my quarterback for the future. I'm going all in, and I want to bring him home. And I'm shooting for Mitch Trubisky from North Carolina, coming back home to Northeast Ohio.
Now, right? He's a sophomore, right?
Yeah, he won't be coming out for 2 more years. But
right.
Hey, I'll tell you what. Right now, Trubisky, if he came out, would I mean he literally, I've seen Walter Football was one that said if he came out next year he'd be a 3rd round pick. So who knows where that kid could develop? But that's Northeast Ohio's own right there, man. Coming up,
Minter boy, right? Yeah,
that's right, man. The Trubisky family out there. But anyways, you got Deshaun Watson at the top of the draft next year. That's a name that some people were intrigued with the way he played, and. But
it'll be, like I said, it'll be very
Chad
interesting
Kelly?
to see what Sashi and the boys have in mind with their analytics to see
I guess
who's worthy of the 2nd pick in the draft, and who knows, maybe they end up moving down to 5 or 6 and to get their Carson Wentz a few picks later. Although I wouldn't be surprised to see some teams jumping up to try to grab a quarterback, because let's face it, there's 10 QBs in a 32-team league. And there is desperation, and we're not far from the only franchise has no idea who their quarterback of the future is, and there are impatient owners and impatient fan bases and people that are enamored of rolling the dice on the next great QB, and there's going to be a lot of people looking at Goff or Wentz, even if they're unworthy of the slot that they're picked in. They're going to get picked because
I hear you.
They're desperate.
I want J.J. Watt with number 2. I want Joey Bosa, and I'm walking away with the Big Bear, and I'm calling it a day, and let's see who's around at 32 when it comes back up, man. I don't know.
You won't get any argument from me on Joey Bosa, that's for sure.
I'm just saying, man. I mean, hell, our offense is going to be it's going to be a work in progress no matter. Well, it's all going to be a work in progress. Give me something to watch. I don't know. I just want to see Joey Bosa tearing after guys, man. Like. It doesn't matter, though, because knowing the Browns' luck, they'll draft Joey Bosa, and just when the Browns, just when the contract comes up, that's when he'll get the big money offer to go somewhere else, and we'll start all over again. See, it's a bad thing to do, Browns previewing and projecting, because we always end up in a bad place at the end of it, doggone it.
Well, let's change the subject to the Tribe then, and then
let's
have
do
something
that.
better to talk about.
Let's switch off. Actually, right here, I was going to tell you guys, you're listening to the Sports Fix. J-Rocc, Dan Wismar here. We've been talking some football, and let's switch gears a little bit, and we'll talk about where do you want to go? Cavs, Tribe, which direction? Because the Indians...
Well, let's talk some Tribe first, and just more and more, Jerry, it seems like the Indians' moves that they made, I guess we could put it in the category of good, bad, and ugly. If we had talked on Monday before Rajay Davis went 3 for 4 yesterday, we would be talking about Rajay Davis, one of the Brown Indian signees, being 1 for 22 this spring, and he would be the ugly, and we could talk about Jose Uribe, who isn't even here and has had 6 big league at bats in the exhibition season. Now, a 36-year-old doesn't need a lot of at-bats, I suppose, in spring training. But the guy that was ticketed for Columbus because he couldn't hit well enough, is hitting .346 with 4 homers and 10 RBIs and is your best hitter all spring, proving once again that baseball always gives you what you least expect. Crazy that Gio Urshela is off to such a great start.
Right.
With the bat. and obviously we know he can play the position in the field. And yet here the Indians are locked into a 36-year-old journeyman Uribe, paying him $4 million, and it's hard to see them backing away from the call that they made to start Urshela in Columbus when he's absolutely tearing up Arizona baseball.
Oh, I agree. You sent me that message the other day. You're like, and as I say it, here comes Urshela again. But and the easy comparison, not one-on-one, but the situation is to look at our boy Lindor last year, and everybody's saying, hey, what's it gonna? He's ready to go now, and then surely he hit the ground running when he came up, and then people will say, hey, why wait? And you saw the energy that he brought, because not only, by the way, your boy Urshela, but how about Tyler Naquin, who said, you know what? You're going to have to push me back down. And again, spring training is about guys hitting 500 and all that crazy stuff. But those are two guys, Indians guys, drafted, developed up through the system that are fighting for it. I hate to sound, by the way, for those of you, because I had somebody ask me about Uribe yesterday, and I said I'd look into it. Bruce in the chat room there, I did not realize that I knew he came, Uribe came over and then left again.
He had to go back.
Yeah, I knew that, but I wasn't sure why. It was because his visa wasn't the right kind of visa. He actually was just visiting. So he got a visitor's visa, came over and played some baseball, and then the visa expired, and he had to go back and get the regular one. So I don't know why waste the time to do that instead of get moving in the process. But yeah, so that was what happened there with that. But anyways,
well, I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say about Tyler Naquin. I mean, it's not as though Tyler Naquin is some flash in the pan this spring who is, for him it's unrealistic for him to beat
that's
out
a number one pick.
A veteran that they signed to a free agent contract in the offseason. I mean, center field is wide open ever since Abraham Almonte took a powder on us. Naquin, it's not like he's trying to beat out, Paul Blair or somebody. He's trying to beat out Colin Cowgill and Shane Patterson and some other rummies.
Will Venable,
So, and it's not like he's trying to dislodge a veteran, Major League Baseball player. He's not. That position is wide open, and if he's, maybe he is a flash in the pan, but versus what? What's the alternative to him? To have Robbie Grossman out there? To have, Shane Robinson or somebody out there who've also never played in the big leagues? If this guy's your future, let's go. It looks like Brantley is going to be back on or about opening day. You've got Rajay Davis. Let him platoon with Chisenhall over in right field. He's not shown much of anything. He had 3 singles yesterday, his first sign of life all spring. And, I'm a big Naquin booster. I might get accused of, rose-colored glasses based on spring training, which you can never put too much stock in. But again, my argument would be, what's the alternative for center field for this team? It just doesn't seem like there is no obvious one. Colin Cowgill, come on. I'm just ready to roll the dice on the Tyler Naquin experiment. He's got the best arm of any of them. He plays defense well, and if he can hit and if he can just get on base a little bit, it looks to me like he's the best alternative.
And it's not even just that he's your guy, but the guys he's it's not like you have to make a decision that you're going to lose out on somebody that you can't get back. I mean, you go with Tyler Naquin. Any of these guys he's competing with, I'm willing to bet they'll be available whenever you want to go offer them a contract and bring them in or call them up or whatever it may be.
Yeah, exactly right. Colin,
they're going to be there. Go find them.
Colin Cowgill's going to be there in Columbus for you.
That's what I'm saying. Will Venable, you can go. If there was a guy where you said, okay, if we don't put this guy on the opening day roster, he's going to go sign somewhere else. And okay, maybe you got a decision to make, but to me, that's not it.
It's not like you even have to, eat $4 million. Like
no,
you have to if you decided to keep Urshela and say, hey, thanks, Jose Uribe, but no thanks. I don't think they're going to do that. That's not the way this organization operates. But they'll. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me the way that Tito loves veterans and whatever that these career 4A outfielders like Robbie Grossman or Robinson or whoever, because they're 32 years old, and that they might be preferable to putting Naquin in a position where, and granted, when you're a kid that young and you're playing an opening day or you're on the opening 25-man roster, we've seen guys like that come out and really stumble with the pressure of being a rookie in the big leagues for the first time in April, and it's cold, and you start slow, and then you get into a funk or whatever. And obviously you can see that happening. You see it happen all the time. But to me, with the lack of any reasonable alternative of a Major League Baseball player to put in center field, I'd be okay with rolling the dice on an Naquin and letting him take his lumps and seeing what we've got there.
I would too. I'm very excited to see it too. And I've got to tell you, speaking of excited, I know some of you that are glass half empty guys when it comes to the Indians, I'll just say it that way, aren't going to like what I'm going to say, but I'm totally drinking the spring training Kool-Aid on these guys. I'm not going to lie. I like what I see from a lot of things on the Indians. I was feeling decent coming into the spring, and I'll just, whatever, man. There's enough negativity around this town that I'm going to be that guy. I think the Indians have got something coming for baseball here this year. I believe that this year the results on the field will match perhaps some of the expectations that these guys had last year. I just feel like this team is going to have some problems. Of course, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, there's just a top to bottom, unbeatable team. But I think the pieces fit together, I think, better than they did. And I think you filled a couple of the gaps. I mean, obviously, you've got some different pieces in the equation this year. I like it. And I think with the pitching they got, I'm very much feeling good about where things are going to go this summer for the Indians. I think it's going to be a good season. I really do.
Well, I do too, Jerry. And, just in terms of people that are having encouraging springs, you've got to look at Yan Gomes and say,
absolutely.
Wow,
yes.
He looks great physically. He's been banging the ball around. You've got to like what you've seen from Mike Napoli.
Mike Napoli, yes.
Early. And that's to say nothing of how solid and healthy, knock on wood, the starting pitching has looked.
The pitching's been amazing.
We don't have the, again, I'm knocking on wood as hard as I can. The injuries that you sometimes see, or the soreness, or the oblique muscle, or this or that, hamstring, or something that you've seen. Kluber looks super healthy. They say he's in great shape. Salazar, Carrasco, these guys both look good. Cody Anderson's look strong. Your bullpen guys looks like, Gorzolani gave up a monster homer yesterday to this Joey Gallo kid. But he's looked very good as a very good potential left-handed relief option to go with Crockett and whoever else, Joe Thatcher maybe. But bottom line, starting pitching has been stellar. Even Bauer, he has his inconsistencies, but it's been very, very positive so far. And we're just heading now into the meat of spring training, where last week I was whining about playing two starters a game. Well, they're starting to put the lineup together that you're going to see day to day. At least every other day, Tito's putting out something resembling a major league lineup in these exhibition games. And, I'm very encouraged by especially Gomes and Napoli, because that's where you need to have the support that, to get from them what you didn't get a year ago, and that is right-handed pop and just a bat at first base and an RBI man behind the plate that we know Gomes can be and has been before he got hurt and sort of had a lost season a year ago.
And with Napoli, that's a big one for me. He was one of the ones I was like, okay, let's see, because I kind of like that. So I remember Mike Brandenberry and I kind of being on different pages about Napoli. I was okay with it, and one of the things about as you mentioned, seeing these couple of guys, Gomes and Napoli, get good springs going is, especially with a guy like Napoli. Think back over however long, the last few years with the Indians, when they've brought these veteran guys, and whether it's Giambi, Swisher, Bourne, whatever. I'm so used to miserable springs and hearing, he's a veteran player, and spring training for him is different for he's just working through his at bats, and we're not even worried about it. You'll see these guys go 1 for 30 through the spring or whatever, and then they don't jump out of it when you hit the season, because I do agree that spring training is far from a full barometer, but but it's a little something. I mean, you at least get an idea if they're swinging the bat well or not. And a lot of times you see these guys not doing well, the older guys that the Indians have brought in, and it's a bad precursor. So when you see guys hit the ground running, especially guys like that are going to be the key. Those are the difference makers. Those guys do their job. This Indians team will be the Indians team that people thought they were last year.
Yeah, I agree. And everything you read about Napoli and hear from Napoli is about attitude and, glad to be here, something to prove, axe to grind, whatever you want to call it. But he's glad to be here. Seems like he's fitting in well, and he's hitting the ball well. If he has his worst year of power production and home runs over the last 5 years, he'll lead the team in homers. I think 18 is the lowest number he's had, and even our enigma wrapped in a paradox, Carlos Santana, is having a good spring with the bat, and obviously he's a guy that when he's hot he can carry your team. It just doesn't get hot often enough, but those three guys, some big bats for you, Gomes, Napoli, and that's not even starting to talk about what Brantley and or Chisenhall or Kipnis are going to give you at the plate. So I think they've got a lot more balance in terms of the side of the plate they swing from, including a few switch hitters. But and the other thing is, talk about your utility player. How about the spring that Jose Ramirez is having? I mean, he looks like he could just be developing into a really fine Major League Baseball player. Who switch hits, and they had him out in center field the other day. So he's going to play second, third, short, maybe even occasionally on the outfield. And he's a switch hitter, and he's fast and runs the bases well. So he just gives you an awful lot. And he's tearing it up this spring.
I absolutely agree. J-Rocc, Dan Wismar, we're talking a little bit about the Indians and Tribe Spring as they're rolling on here, you guys, listening to the Sports Fix. And I'll tell you what, man, again, not buying too much into the hype of spring training. As I was I was flipping through online, and a picture popped up. Danny Salazar with his Wild Thing glasses was...
I saw that this morning.
Yeah. I saw it yesterday, but the picture just popped up in front of me. I thought he had the rim taped. I didn't realize that he actually had they have the skull and crossbones embedded in the middle of the glasses there. So I just saw that. Yeah, pretty good. By the way, odds came out in Vegas sports books. They've got the Tribe 9-1 to win the American League and 20-1 to win the World Series. Of the three Cleveland teams, they've got the Cavs at 3-1 to win the championship, the Tribe at 20-1, and the Browns at 150-1. And I think those are good odds. I may have to put $10 on the Browns because those odds should be way higher than that. This should be 1,000-1 payoff on that.
Sounds like a pretty good bet to me.
But 9-1 to win the American League. What do you think of those odds?
Well,
could be 1-9. I guess if it's 1-9, you're a favorite. Yeah, no. So I guess it's better.
I said it last week that the Mets were in the World Series last year because they had the best starting pitching. They had nothing close to the best lineup, and I think the Indians are going to have the best starting pitching in the American League, and so I don't think it's outrageous to suggest that they might end up, certainly in the playoffs, and anything can happen from there. So I'm enthusiastic about the year. I mean, I'm a homer, I freely admit it, but like you, I think we're going to see the team that maybe Sports Illustrated thought we'd see a year ago, and we got a good manager, and they've made some good additions, so we'll see.
And you notice a lot of times in sports in general, you'll see that a team that was favored to do something, whether they were put on a cover or whether they were just predicted to do a lot of times you'll see a team that it'll be the next year or 2 years later that they develop into that what people thought, because for whatever reason things don't work out the way. And sometimes they don't develop at all, but a lot of times you'll see that it's the team that last year was predicted to be the big winner or go to the Super Bowl or whatever, has a down year that year. The next year they kind of have that year that people thought they were going to have the year before.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, it helps if you pick a team every year
Well, that's true.
And I'm just the example I'm referring to is that for the last 3 or 4 years, it was going to be the year of the Kansas City Royals. And then finally,
eventually it was, yeah.
You know, so I guess if you're consistent, sooner or later you're going to be right?
So eventually all them Browns fans are going to say, see, we told you that next year was our year. It just took us 37 years to get here, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
All right, Dan, let's wrap it up with the team that has 3-1 odds, according to the Vegas sports books as of today, to win a championship. That would be the Cavs. I won't put those odds that high, although I guess that would make sense because to me there are only 2 teams that I would say have a better chance than the Cavs. We've talked about the Spurs and the Warriors. Problem is to me, the teams that can beat you are the teams that you're going to have to beat. Like in the East, even if there was a bad matchup, you could avoid it, or things could work out where you don't play a team. And to me, there's no way that one of the 2 teams that you're going to have to beat doesn't come out of the West. There's not a chance in the world to me that it's a team other than the Spurs or the Golden State Warriors. But let's talk a bit about the Cavs. Since you and I talked, they had a 4-game road trip here, took the first 3 out on the West Coast and looked pretty good, especially, although I like the way they blew out the Clippers. But for some reason, is it just me, or in the last 2 years since LeBron came back, this version of the Cavs, their matchups are not good for the Clippers because it seems like they blow the Clippers out every time these 2 teams play, and the Clippers are a damn good team, and I'm always surprised going, man, how did the Cavs handle the Clippers as well as they did? But they did that, and you're thinking, okay, cool, man, we're going to finish this thing up. And I remember I went over to my buddy's house the other night to watch the last game, late night against Utah. It was like 11 o'clock tip-off, and my buddy's like, oh, yeah, man, I forgot the game was even on until you said something. It's Utah. And I said, oh, man, it's the last of a road trip. I want to see how they play because good teams let the last game of a road trip go sometimes when they're 3-0 on the trip. Championship teams stomp that team out and come home 4-0. Cavs let off the gas and lost a game that they had no business losing. Utah just wanted it more, but they refused to pass the ball inside. Did you watch the Jazz game the other day?
I did. I watched every game on the road trip, Jared.
They didn't.
And it was apparent early on in that game that, first of all, the Cavs are tired. They're gassed.
Yes, they weren't playing defense.
LeBron was tired. They're playing tired. It's the typical way that a team looks at the end of a West Coast road trip. And second of all, the ball's not going in the hole. I mean, how many threes did Kyrie rattle in and out? I mean, it's not like he was way off on his shots. But when Kyrie is going 3 out of his first 15 from the floor. 3
for 15, yeah.
J.R. Smith was 1 of 9 before he hit a 3 right near the end of the game in the last minute and a half. Those 2 guys from 3-point range were 3 out of 17 for the game. You're not going to win games when those 2 guys shoot like that. And there wasn't a lot of great shooting from the rest of the guys either. I think Kevin Love he didn't have a bucket in the first half, hit his first basket of the game in the third quarter, and then kind of carried him through a good third quarter where they came back and tied the game. But when Kyrie's shooting like that, 5 for 19, something like that, took 19 shots in the game, and scored 11 points. I don't know what it was, but the ball just wasn't going down for him. And you're going to have games like that. And LeBron was coming up short. LeBron's bricking free throws. They were tired. And so I don't know that it necessarily showed much other than, and they've lost 5 of their last 6 in Utah for whatever
Here's what
reason.
it shows.
It's a tough place for them to play. But I'm just trying to, as opposed to, and I'm not down on them. They came back. I have every confidence that they're going to probably end up with 60 wins, and they're going to cement that number 1 seed, and that's all they intended to do. I hope they can get some guys some rest. It's good to see LeBron get a chance to sit out a couple of fourth quarters on the trip as they were up big on the Clippers. And so anyway, it was predictable, like you said. Before you sat down for the game, you were thinking, wow, this could be the one that comes up to bite us. And then when you just, Kyrie just couldn't throw the ball in the ocean from a rowboat that night, and that's what'll happen to you.
And I get you on all of that, and I'm still happy overall with the road trip. The thing is that they do two things that bug me. I mentioned that at home they did it, and on the Browns they did it, or on the road they did it as well. The worst team that they played is the team that they lost on each of those last two stands. That ability to, and both of them, it was Memphis when they had no starters, and Utah when they're missing their key guy. Like, that ability to overlook the team when they're missing, they do show me that from time to time. That ability to let a team that just has no business beating them beat them. That bothers me. But it's more their willingness to lock into that run and gun style of play, and maybe that is part of being tired at the end of a road trip. But they do it too much for my good. I remember during the game, and I want to say it was during the Jazz game, but it might have been during the Clippers game. But I remember Fred putting a graphic up on the screen of the best three-point teams in the NBA, teams that have made the most. And the Cavs were 4th or 5th on the list. But the difference between their number and the top couple of teams, and obviously Golden State's at the very top of that, was huge. And that just strikes me to show me that you can beat every team in the league playing that style except the teams that are the best at that style. And that's the part that scares me about the end of the road, is that it doesn't matter what you do in the regular season, doesn't matter what you do in the Eastern Conference playoffs. At that style of play, to me, the Cavs cannot beat the Golden State. Now, they may be able to beat the Spurs because the Spurs are an older team. They're not going to beat Golden State playing Golden State's game. And when you see a game like the other night, and again, I was happy with the road trip, but they were averse to running any kind of offense. We were joking during the game that the couple of times they would run a play, they'd have a guy come off 2 or 3 screens and get wide open for a shot. You never see that. You never see them running screens. And I was joking. I'm like, how come? I said, man, LeBron hasn't set a screen since high school. But I'm kidding. I know stars don't do a lot of that stuff in the NBA. But when the Cavs do run sets, when they run triple screens and back cuts and that stuff, they're pretty beautiful to watch play basketball. But so often they don't. And the other night they were doing it again. Isolation ball, one pass, one shot, three-pointer. That's going to beat a lot of bad teams, but that is going to get you beat at the key moments, man. And I hate to see them fall into that, because I think that's their bad habit, is when they get caught up into that run and gun game instead of pounding it in the post and getting to the foul. What did they, 10 free throws in the second half? I mean, they weren't getting to the foul line. They weren't pounding the Jazz. If they'd have made the Jazz suffer on the inside, they'd have won that game. Instead, they're coming down and chucking up a 3 and running right back down and playing half a set of defense.
Well, I think they did sort of fall in love with the 3 after their showing in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
And they hit almost 50% that night and threw in, 18, 19 threes. Came out in Utah, figured they're going to do the same thing. And then you see JR going 1 for 9. And you see, Love not missing his first few, and Kyrie, having the shooting night he did, and just goes to show you that you live by the 3, you die by it. That was the night they died by it, because they were more fatigued, and I'm not saying those shots were consistently coming up short. Kyrie was just shooting in some terrible luck that night. He had so many balls rattle in and out, Yeah, you can't run that all the time, and then, like you say, you should have beaten that Utah team just by. Sometimes I think LeBron too becomes too unselfish. You love his unselfishness, but then there are also key times in a game where that if he just got into his head like he sometimes does, because I'm going to the hoop and there's nobody's going to stop me and no one can. That you just wish he would just do that on 2 or 3 or 4 possessions in a row, and stem the tide when things aren't going your way, or put a team away when they need to be put away. And sometimes he's unselfish to a fault, and he'll kick it out to somebody that's going to brick a 3 or something, and a couple of possessions in a row of doing that, and you can get yourself out of a game on the road.
I mean, one thing I go to, talking about that, and this is it. Even with the win on the West Coast, I saw them getting into that run and gun. Go back 2 weeks. I just go back the last 5 or 6 games. Go back to the win at home against Celtics 2 weeks ago. They've given up since then 103, 106, 111, 108, 114, or no, they scored 104, 90 and 94. So they got back to it at the end of that trip. But they like that Lakers game, you know? I mean, the world business did you have giving up 108 points to the Lakers that game was an ugly game to watch, with the exception of watching Kobe Bryant kind of crack open that fountain of youth for a little bit in the early part of that game and get his thing going. But, 111 to the Kings. I mean, those things, getting into those shootouts, you win them during the regular season. I just worry about those habits sticking with guys as you get into the parts that matter, Yeah,
that's true. You shouldn't be giving up 111, 108 to Sacramento and the Lakers. But that's the game they've chosen to.
I know.
To play.
That's where they're going.
I still scratch my head as just because you're pushing the ball up the court should not necessarily mean that you're playing a different kind of defense on the other end. But somehow it just seems to go hand in hand.
I saw Campy Russell ask the exact same question that I asked you a month ago after the Cavs made the coaching change. He said he looked over at Phelps and said, are the Cavs a three-point shooting team, or are they a half-court team, or are they a run-and-gun team? Because we are 75% of the way through the season, and I don't know what kind of team the Cavs are. And that's where I keep coming to. I'm not trying to be nitpicky because this team has so much talent. It's ridiculous. But I just think when you have an identity, that only matters at the stretches of games that are the key points. I mean, it's like if you ever seen Semi-Pro, Woody Harrelson says, we're going to call this play the puke because we're going to run it until we puke so that in the last 30 seconds of a game, you don't even need to remember the play. It's just ingrained in you. And I think that style of play gets ingrained in you. And when you get away from it, sometimes it's like flipping the switch on and on we talk about. Sometimes you flip it and the lights don't come on like you thought they were. And they can be so good that I hate to see them get out of it because that's where it comes to bite them.
Yeah, and Windhorst says the same thing when he talks about you've made so many changes and you change, seemingly on the fly. You're going to go small, and then you go small for 6 games, and then you don't go small anymore. And you change coaches, and you've got a different style, and you play that style for a while. And there's been so many adjustments made during the year that there is no. You talk about an identity, and he says pretty much the same thing without saying it just that way. There's no consistency. There's no, Ty Lue, since he's been here, he's tried different things. He's tried different matchups, tried different rotations. What he hasn't done is take one thing and stick with it. And, I guess over the last, 15, 20 games of the season, I guess that's pretty much what you have to do right now is stabilize something and go with it and get into a routine and get into a formula that works for you so you can have some momentum going into the playoffs. And that's what we haven't seen from this team so far is that consistency and that sameness and that formula, identity, however you want to call it. And hopefully that's something that he's been tinkering with and experimenting with, and hopefully he's going to settle on something and we're going to see some identity before the end of the year.
Absolutely. And again, Cavs, it's great to talk about this stuff when you're 47 and 19 and winning 72% of your games. So Cavaliers, they'll continue. 15 games after tonight. You've got the Mavericks and then they've got, I believe, 15 more after that final stretch. And they've missed a few chances, Dan. Every time they get a chance to put some extra games between themselves and Toronto, that's the game where they stumble their foot. So, what is it? 2.5 right now is the 2 games. I think
it might be down to 2. To 2.
I think it's 2.
But, the good side of what you were saying earlier that there's 2 teams in the league that can beat you. Well, the good news is you only have to beat one of them.
Yep.
So like last year, they were worried about having to play Chicago, and Atlanta back to back or whatever. You got to beat both of the other 2 good teams in your conference, and you usually end up having to do that, but. There's 2 teams in the league that you can say are better than the Cavs, and And the good news is we'll only have to beat one of them as long as we can get that far.
That's it, man. They've got Dallas tonight, and then before you and I talk again, they've got a couple more in Florida. They've got Orlando and Miami on the road before we get back here Monday, back to the queue for the Denver Nuggets. So Cavaliers down the final stretch, and I think they've got, 2, 4, I think 6 of these final games are going to be on national TV. A lot of chance to see as the Cavs get themselves ready for the playoffs, and we'll watch too. Let's look at I haven't seen the standings. Who would they play right now? Who has the 8th seed right now? Do you know?
I believe it's Detroit.
Yeah, that's what I thought. They got it the other day. I didn't know if they were still there.
Yeah, and I think Chicago is next up. I mean, in the 9 spot right now. At least as I looked at it.
So Chicago fell out with that loss the other day.
I believe so. I'm not 100% on that, but at least that's where
they're back in. They got back in. They're tied. I've got it right here. They've got the 8th spot is a dead heat between the Bulls and the Pistons right now.
Right.
So the Bulls pulled themselves back up. The Pistons had taken over the 8th spot. I think it was Saturday or whatnot. Did you see the Raptors Bulls game the other day where the rapper distracted the guy from the Bulls and he got the 5-second call at the end of the game?
I did not see that.
Yeah, no. Drake, the rapper, he's from Toronto up there, big sideline fan of the Raptors, and he was yapping his trap behind I can't think of the guy's name from the Bulls, and he got him a 5-second 5-second call with 1 second left in the game or whatever. And cost him the game the other night. And the player said, hey, I wasn't distracted, but clearly there was something. But Bulls, Pacers, and the Pistons are all kind of right there within a game of each other in the 7 and 8 spot. So any of those, obviously the worst one for the Cavs would be the Bulls in the first round. But then again, that may also be your toughest challenge period, so maybe it's not bad to hit that one off the ground running. Can you believe the Bulls may miss out on the playoffs totally?
Yeah, that is hard to believe. They just have not been that good this year. They've been inconsistent, and like I said, just a game over 500. What's crazy is looking over at the West and where you see a team like the Thunder that has 47 wins, basically 2 wins fewer than the first seed Cavaliers, and they are
they're 15 back. Yeah, 15 back from the Warriors, man, and they're 45 and 22.
Exactly. So that's pretty nutty when you got a team that's 54 games over 500 right now. It's and you think about it too, and you look forward to the finals, and you hope the Cavs get there. And the cynical Cleveland fan in me, is thinking already, are the Warriors the Bulls of 2016? In other words, is a really, really good Cleveland team going to get nosed out as they did last year by a historically good team? Whether you want to talk about the John Elway Broncos to the Cleveland Browns, or certainly the Bulls and the Cavs of the 90s would be, the late 80s would be the other example of a very, very good Cleveland team having the bad timing to come up against a team that is historically good.
Historically great. And the Spurs, too.
Plays out, but
the Spurs have the same, what you just described, may hit San Antonio. San Antonio is 57-10. That is an amazing regular season record. They're 3.5 games out of the top spot in the West, man. I mean, and they're undefeated at home, too.
10 more games in the Cavs, yeah.
They're 33-0 at home. Do you know that? The Spurs have a better home record than the Warriors. They're 33-0. The Warriors are 31-0 at home.
Right. I heard yesterday the Spurs home streak is the 3rd longest in history.
Yes.
And obviously the Warriors right behind them, probably in 4th spot.
That is amazing. I hope the West comes down to those two, just because I'm dying to see a 7-game series between the Spurs and the Warriors to see who takes on the Cavaliers. Sorry to be presumptuous, Eastern Conference, but I don't quake in my boots from the Toronto Raptors. All right, Dan, before I let you go, real quick, Buckeyes missed out on the big tournament. They're playing in the NIT. They got a first-round victory over Akron last night to move themselves on. Somehow they're going to host the number 2 seed. How does that work, by the way, that the lower seed is going to be the home team against the Florida Gators here when they play on Saturday?
Well, it works because the Florida Gators basketball court is under construction.
There we go. That's why.
So
okay.
That is your reason. Where they lucked out. They get to host the Gators. They won that game last night in ugly fashion.
Overtime. Yeah.
Overtime, and they also won it without really 2 of their best players. Not only is Jayshawn Tate out for the season with his shoulder injury, but Tate Bates-Jop also had to sit it out, took ill during the day before the game and had to sit it out. So they got it one out, and it was an ugly win, but they threw up some real ugly possessions at the end of the game, but somehow managed to come out on top and made a few free throws down the stretch. But I actually would be surprised if they beat Florida. But it'll be the end to an underwhelming season for the Buckeyes, and hopefully this is a very, very young team. No seniors, 1 junior, and they're starting 2 or 3 freshmen every game, and these guys are going to get nothing but better. You hope that they can develop. Really, the critique of Mott over the last few years has been that his players haven't gotten better, that they don't do as good a job of developing talent as their rivals in the Big Ten. Certainly not as good as Michigan State or even Michigan. Having players get, for one thing, stronger. A lot of criticism of their strength and conditioning programs and of the developmental process over a 3 or 4 year period in Columbus. And Mata needs to do a better job of that, and we'll see how that works next year, see if these guys get bigger, stronger, better, and we'll see how this program moves forward.
We will. Dan, the Ohio State Buckeyes and the NIT. We got March Madness going on. Dan's not going to give me a pick. Give me somebody. Give me somebody, since we're not going to talk until Monday in the big tournament.
A sleeper for you, not for the title, but a sleeper for you would be Miami.
Okay.
Let's see, as far as winning this thing, Oregon looks great. Villanova, one of those 2 teams maybe. That's about
I like Villanova, by the way.
Now.
Yeah, I like Villanova too. All right, Dan, we got a lot to keep us busy. This is I know one of you as well, favorite weekends of the year with all the basketball games going on.
Oh, it's great. I love it. I'm going to try to figure out a time to get out of the office here either tomorrow or Friday in the afternoon and sneak out and watch some basketball.
You got it. And we'll talk about basketball. Round 1 will be over. We'll be to the middle part of this thing. So you and I will talk about that on Monday. We'll talk more about the Browns. The Tribe will be 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks from opening day and so much. So we got a lot to do Monday.
Sounds good, Jerry. Always fun to be with you.
You got it. My man, Dan Wismar from Everybody Hates Cleveland with us as always, doing the thing on the Sports Fix. You guys can check him out, everybodyhatescleveland.com, and as well, all of their articles, we put them through our Facebook and Twitter whenever they come out, so make sure that you speaking of check it out, my buddy Rob Roa, he's a Cleveland area musician. He put together quite the entertaining music video, Rehab with Johnny, he calls it. They actually went out to Vegas a couple of months ago and filmed this, and my man's got the Billy Manziel get up on, and anyways, it's not safe for work, so don't watch it at work because you'll probably lose your job, and be careful watching it around the kids because it is, again, a bit adult oriented, but it's pretty funny. My man Rob Roa and his producer Matt Mountis put together a pretty good one, Rehab with Johnny. I tweeted it across our Twitter accounts. Go ahead and check it out if you get into the thing. Hey, get a laugh at the kid because he spent the last 2 years laughing at each and every one of you, so who cares, man? Kick him on his way out the door. We're going to call it a day. Thank you guys for being with us. Thanks for all the concern again throughout the week, and hopefully my head continues to feel better, and we'll be back here Monday, guys, unless somebody decides to beat the heck out of me this weekend. We'll be back Monday doing the thing. Dan Wismar will be back with us. We'll talk about the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. Speaking of, get in the Sports Fix Tournament Challenge. Go to ESPN's NCAA Tournament Challenge on their website. Find the group titled The Sports Fix and enter your bracket into our contest. The winning bracket gets a Cleveland Sports prize pack, including a copy of Cleveland's Finest by Vince McKee and LeBron James' Redemption of a King, both by Vince McKee. Cleveland's Finest is autographed by Cleveland's American League Rookie of the Year back in the day, Super Joe Charbonneau. So we look forward to bringing that to the winner. Sign up for the tournament before the first game tips off tomorrow, and we will see you back here live noon on Monday. Same bat time, same bat channel. The Sports Fix, baby. We'll be back with you Monday right here on The Fix. We love you, Cleveland and beyond. Have a hell of a weekend. Enjoy some basketball, some baseball, some hoops, and come on back Monday. Let's get our fix.
It's the mistake on the leg to you, but this is my own. Tatted it on my arm, that I represent that. Homie, I'm from Cleveland, I will tell the president that. Hardest, yeah, we been there. Made some of the greats here. Midwest best, this is MGK's, yeah. Shouts out to St. Clair, Uptown, yes, y'all. Heading to the flex, get it popping up with step flaws. Old State monster, this the home of King James. We are not the empire, but this is where the kings play. Cleveland, let's go.
We rep our city. Blue lights separate the ground from the gritty. We're sick fitted. Hood pass cover any city that we visit. When you're from Cleveland, to the rivals of us from these streets, we hustle, don't sleep. Out here in Cleveland, Cleveland, Cleveland.
Okay, now here we go.